Hi everyone, I hope you're alright. Welcome back to my channel. It's currently 10 past midnight where I am, and that is Vietnam. We are currently in the middle of COVID breakout. We thought things were looking better, but now unfortunately there are about 10 or so cases each day, which is really sad. But we're not here to talk about that sadness. We're here to talk about English and how to learn speaking English. Today I have a video for you about spontaneous speaking, be it public speaking or just speaking with one other person or speaking in small groups. Every day we are faced with numerous situations where we have to speak just off the cuff without any preparation. So I guess I just want to give you a few tips of how to make sure that you get better and better at spontaneous speaking. Situations that require you to speak spontaneously do not limit to just the IELTS speaking test. The actual IELTS speaking test is not the only place where you're required to speak English, because you're taking the test in order to have access to further opportunities where you get to speak English even more, right? Otherwise, why would you take the test? So apart from the IELTS speaking test, you get a job. Let's say you get a job and this is your first day. And your boss says, introduce yourself to the room. This room is full of people you don't know, you're meeting them for the first time, and yet you need to make a memorable impression. Another example is me right now. I have done no preparation for this video whatsoever. I'm just speaking off my head, looking into my phone, looking at my face, and just speaking my mind. So I guess recording a spontaneous video when you had no time to prepare also counts as an opportunity for spontaneous speaking. Another situation, if you're a student, you probably take classes, and I don't know about you, but for me, if I want to take the most out of a class, a lecture, or speech, or a workshop, I have to participate. So I have to be actively participating, asking questions, taking notes. But then not every question is a good question. Not every question is a useful question. So when I was at university, I read this book and I took an advice from it, which resonated with me for years. And that was, at any event, at any meeting, or at any class, at any lecture, make sure you raise your voice at least 5 times. At first, just things like raising my hand and nodding, saying yes, or saying me, I agree, would count as 1 time, but gradually I increased my the strictness towards myself and only counted the times when I actually asked a good question. So spontaneous speaking also takes place in situations like that. You listen to what somebody says and you're thinking something in your head, but how can you formulate that thinking into a good question that can be useful to both yourself and the audience that's listening to your question? Nowadays, lectures are usually recorded, so that question can go even further than just the people who are present in that class. Anybody who listens to that recording can benefit from your question. So how can you make that little part of your spontaneous speaking really good quality? Now, there are many more situations, obviously, and I can list them. The list can go on forever, but we haven't got all time. We're already 5 minutes into the recording, so I will just get started with the actual tips. Now, before I give you the tips, just a bit of self-promo, I guess. So I actually got band 9 on my IELTS speaking, and generally my friends and colleagues keep saying that I'm a good communicator, I'm a good public speaker, I don't get shy when I speak publicly, and I convey my messages well. So I like to think that that my tips could be beneficial to you because they come from real experience. I had to sit and think a little bit about what I can actually advise you, and I have compiled a short list of just 4 main tips that can help you master your spontaneous speaking. Obviously, speaking, like any other skill, takes practice. So I'm not here to say that do what I say and tomorrow you'll be a great spontaneous speaker. Probably that's not going to happen. Although it may. You never know. Never say never. But yeah, take these and apply them to your own particular situation. See how they work for you. They might work, they might not work, but I know they worked for me and they work for some people that I have actually shared them with. So here you go. So here we go. Tip number 1, better done than perfect. What does it mean? It just means that spontaneous speaking doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be ready to post to a Wall Street Journal, but it needs to convey the message, and it needs to convey your emotions, your connectedness to that message. So when I say better done than perfect, I mean just speak your mind. Just say what you think and do not worry about perfect grammar, perfect phrasal verbs, perfect conditionals, perfect prepositions. Do not worry about any of that. Just speak what you think. And if your English proficiency is anything less than 9.0 or anything less than native, then you will make mistakes. I make mistakes a lot of the times when I'm just deep into a conversation. I make mistakes, and I like to think that I'm not a bad English speaker, but I do make mistakes. I'm a foreigner speaking the foreign language, so I make mistakes, but it doesn't stop me from saying what I think. If you worry too much about how you say things, you will essentially hinder your own creative thinking. So you will actually do more harm than good to the message that you're conveying. So this might sound counterintuitive because you would think that tips to improve your spontaneous speaking would include improving the quality of the speech. But that is true, but that comes with time. In order to get enough practice to get to that point, you need to just start speaking. Your speech will have 10 mistakes at first. Then the next day it will have 9 mistakes. And then after that it will have 7 mistakes. And before you know it, there will be just a couple of mistakes, which are nothing compared to the benefits that you get from actually conversing in English in a natural environment, I guess. So just stop worrying. About being perfect, and then you will be perfect. Tip number 2, have an idol, but always be yourself. Does this tip sound a bit abstract? And that's because it is. We need to adjust the mindset before we adjust the actual operation. For me, in terms of speaking, public speaking, I idolize Oprah Winfrey. Who doesn't? There was a time when Michelle Obama was almost as close on my list of speaking idols, but Oprah Winfrey still wins. I love her because of her wisdom, her talent, her determination. And I look up to her. When I practiced my speaking many years ago, my speaking was not as natural as now. I was just an international student studying English like everyone else. So back then, I very often watched Oprah Winfrey shows, interviews, talks, and I tried to learn from her the way she speaks, the way she conducts herself, her body language, and I thought those things that I learned from her were really useful back then. And then gradually, when I incorporated those things gradually, one thing at a time, into my own speaking, those were slowly and steadily converted into my own version of, body language, facial expressions, voice intonations, and all those things. I learned from the best, but I created my own version of it. And I think that's the best of both worlds, because we should never pretend to be someone we're not. We should always strive to be our own self, but just the best version of it. Why wouldn't you want that, right? Now, tip number 3 came from the time when I worked as an auditor in the UK. I worked as an auditor for about a year and a half, somewhere around that. And on my first day, I was given a lot of instructions of how to operate different things, how to navigate different locations in the company. I was introduced to all those people with different names and roles and positions, and it was all difficult to remember, obviously. But one thing that was said to me only once, and I remembered it from that day until now, and I think I'll never forget it, is when a client called the company phone and the phone rang to my desk, obviously I had to pick up the phone and answer and speak to the client. But the rule number 1 that my boss said at the time was, smile before you open your mouth. So didn't matter how stressful, how overswamped anyone was with work, if a client called, you must smile before you open your mouth. And that does wonders, because we never pay attention to this. We just think, oh, I'll smile when there's something funny about what someone said or what I said. But if you smile before you speak, it automatically changes the emotions in your voice. It automatically changes the way that you are conveying the message to the listener. So always speaking to positive and upbeat and happy auditors seem to please the clients. So I guess that's the way it was kept up. This advice I incorporated into my personal life, into my further education, into my further professional career, and it has worked everywhere. When I bump into someone in my place of work, before I even say hello, I smile, and then my hello sounds even better. So before you give a spontaneous speech, before you have to say something to anyone, unless you are trying to be unpleasant, but normally just smile before you open your mouth, and the whole mindset shifts. The whole dynamics of the conversation just shifts, and everybody feels good, and then you feel good. And what you says uh, and what you say just ends up on an entirely different, better level. Last but not least, tip number 4. This is a bit of a cheated one because I have packed a number of things into this one tip. So this one tip could actually, if I wanted, could be just broken down into 5 small tips. But here it goes. Tip number 4. Slow down, emphasize, pause, and don't stammer. Have you ever been spoken to by someone who speaks so fast that you can feel that they can't catch a breath? You can feel that they have no time to think what they're going to say next, so they end up repeating words as a way to give themselves time to think. And when you speak spontaneously, when you give a spontaneous speech, one of the most important skills to give a quality speech is to be able to think on your feet. This advice was given to me by a professor with whom I worked at my current university because I'm a lecturer, and he is a visiting lecturer from the US, and I collaborated with him on a couple of courses, and he gave me this advice that to become a great teacher and create engaging classes, you have to be able to think on your feet. And that means think as you are actually standing in the classroom. So what you do in the classroom doesn't just come from the preparation that you had done before that. You can actually improvise, and you can enhance the lecture by adding things as you go. You feel like, oh, right now it would be really good to add on to what the students are doing by adding this and this and that. And those things you might have not prepared earlier in advance, but you're going to do them anyway because you're an on the feet thinker. When there is something important and you'd like to make a statement, a little trick actually used by Oprah Winfrey and Michelle Obama and all the other great speakers is the magic number of 3. Emphasize and say it in 3s. So it can be either that you repeat something 3 times slowly with emphasis, with different intonations in your voice, or you say a list of 3 things that point to the thing that you're trying to emphasize. And after you've done that, just pause for a second or two. Pause for effect. Pause for it to sink in, for people who have actually just heard something to think about it instead of moving on to the next thing. And lastly, don't stammer. So if you stammer, if you say too many filler words like, or you'll just end up sounding less professional. So I guess when you need a second to think, which is why we usually use filler words, just pause. Just stop for a second or two. Nobody's chasing you. And those little silences actually have a great effect of regaining the full attention of people who are listening to you, because sometimes when you keep speaking, you keep talking, their minds might wander and you lose their attention. So the words that you are saying essentially lose value because fewer people are listening to them. So do appear more professional, more convincing, more high quality by applying the 4 tips that I've just given you. So do let me know what you think of what I've just shared. Do you agree? Do you disagree? I am completely open to all opinions. I have a mindset that it's okay it's okay to agree to disagree. It's obviously very normal for people to have different opinions. So you are entitled to your own opinion, but I would be very interested to know what you think. What are the tips that you have learned, you are applying to your own speaking that actually work? So please share them in the comments. Please, if you don't want to share them publicly, send me a message. I have a blog that I'm just starting out. I'll link it down below so that you can find a more interactive channel to communicate with me and people who are like-minded. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I hope you benefited from it somehow, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye.